So I'm Meghan Reilly. I am a what's called a UX strategist, and I work for a user experience design agency in Cambridge, Massachusetts, US. So yeah, Cambridge. So today, let's get right into it. How many of you ride a bicycle? Good, good. How many of you ride a bicycle in the city? Excellent. How many of you drive a car? How many of you drive a car in the city? Good, good. So I do sort of both as well. So biking is becoming pretty popular in Boston, Cambridge. I think people have started to realize that we need to be paying attention to our health as Americans, and we also need to be paying attention to the amount of disgusting things we put into the environment with our gas-guzzling SUVs. So it's good, there's some awareness coming, but as part of this, it means that there are a lot of bikes and a lot of cars on the road. And we're still learning how to share the road. We're still learning how to figure that out. So when I'm biking, I know that everyone who is driving is just completely incapable. It's like they've never driven a car before. They're all over the road. They're trying to hit me. It's really just a stressful situation. When I'm driving, the bikers are terrible. It's like they just learned to ride a bike. They're all over the place. They're in front of my car. I don't understand what's happening. Something is seriously wrong here. So, how many of you have ever been frustrated when using a website? Good, good, me too. And has anyone here, be honest, ever made a development or a design decision based on thinking, well, the user will figure this out. This is the easiest way to do it. They can read the documentation. It's going to take a long time. Anybody? Anybody did that? Good, good, good. So we're all being honest. So what's missing in both of these examples is empathy. And empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. But basically, when we're talking about empathy when it comes to user experience design, we're focused on just understanding what's going on with that other person. Understanding in the case of, for example, our biker and our driver, why is the driver frustrated? Why are they honking at me? Why can't they just let me be? Well, maybe they've had a stressful day. Maybe their son is struggling in school. He has a big test today. He just dropped him off at school. They had this long heart-to-heart. Now he's running late. His boss is already calling him, and he really just needs to get going. And he's just not really thinking about, what else is going on. He's just focused on that. And having that understanding, having that information, say, well, okay, maybe I might move to the side instead of kind of swerving down the middle of the road. Not that I would do that, but it's really just, understanding where someone else is coming from and what their situation is. And in user experience design, we are putting the user at the center of whatever we're building. So we're asking ourselves, who are we building this product for? Because chances are it's not for us. I mean, we're building it, we're enjoying building it, we like building it, and we're getting a reward out of it, but at the end of the day, we're probably not the ones using it. Am I going too fast? Okay. And understanding not only who's using it, but why. Why are they using this product? Why is it something that we want them to use? Why is it something that they are using? So we need that information in order to improve the design or design a great product that works well for them. So we've all traveled to be here today. I've honestly actually never been to Europe before, so this is really exciting. So it's definitely a new place for me. And for many of you, my guess is that you may not have a lot of experience with user experience design, maybe something you've heard of, but it might not be something that you've worked with or worked on a project that is a UX project directly. So kind of, as everyone's been so friendly to me coming to a new country, I'm going to give back and bring you to my country, which is the user experience design country. So we're going to go on a little trip. I'll be your tour guide. Don't be scared. I'm not taking you on a bike or in a car. So here's our trip itinerary. First, we're going to just define what user experience design is. We're going to talk about who will be traveling with us on this journey, kind of who are the locals. We'll talk about the process. We're going to discuss our goals and end results. And then I'm going to give you some small steps that you can take to get started with UX when you get back to your office on Monday, if you want. You may just need to catch up on emails. So the experience the user has when interfacing with a product, application, or website. When I first read that definition, I said, well, that's nice. What does that mean? Because it's not really a clear definition. So let's see if we can unpack it a little bit. So you notice when things are broken. Let's say that you're booking a flight to come here. And it's a wonderful experience. You go, you sit down, you immediately find and book the flight that you want, pay, move on with your life. Now, if it was that easy, you probably wouldn't actually notice. Chances are you're not going to say, you know what, I would love to sit down and do that again, and again, and again, because it was so amazing. If it works, it just works, and it doesn't really, you don't think much about it. But if it was difficult, if you were booking a flight and you couldn't find a flight, or let's say the page just kept refreshing, or you were about to hit submit and then something terrible happened and you lost all of your information, you had to enter all of your credit card information again. Chances are that's going to register with you. You're going to say, hey, this is frustrating. You might even try to book through another site or another airline, or you might call your travel agent. Or you might say, you know what, I don't want to go. I'll just stay home. It's easier. So we don't want that to happen. You never want someone to walk away from your product or your website because they were frustrated. So the point is that if you have a good experience, you probably don't give it much thought. It just is. It just happens. But when something isn't working, it's noticeable. You know when things are broken. So let's go back to our definition of user experience. It's a little clearer now. So the experience you have, good or bad, when interfacing with a product, application, or website. So the user, in this case, the experience you have, is whoever is using the product or website. So if you are using it, you are the user. If Jane is the person using the site, then it's the experience that Jane has, good or bad. This definition's better. Let's see if we can get it even a little closer. This is my friend Data. Everyone know who Data is? Good. Okay. So this is the type of thing that Data would say. I interfaced with the program. And in English, this isn't, there's nothing really wrong with that sentence, but it's just not an appropriate word choice. People, we don't interface. We have a conversation. If I'm walking down the street and I bump into you and you say, hey, Megan, have you seen Jim lately? It's like, yeah, I interfaced with him yesterday. It doesn't sound right. I saw him, I talked to him. And this is the same way that things are with software. I don't ever think I'm going to go upstairs and sit down and interface with my computer right now. It doesn't sound good. So I go upstairs and I have something I want to do on the computer. I'm going to go upstairs and pay that bill now. I'm going to go upstairs and I'm going to, sign up for that class. I'm having a conversation with the software and the websites back and forth. They're a tool to help with that conversation. So here's our definition again. The experience you have, good or bad, when trying to do something with product. So this is what user experience design is all about, actually, is iterating on something quickly to get to a design that helps the user achieve their goal in the best way possible. So what we did here over the past couple of slides is we took a definition that personally I didn't think was very clear and tried to make it a little clearer. Now, whether or not I succeeded would depend on whether or not I tested it out and, asked people, did this resonate with you or whatever. But the point is that I made some iterations with the goal of making it more a definition that's less full of technical jargon and clearer so that everyone can understand it. So now that we've defined the user experience, we can define user experience design. So user experience design is thinking about design to create an experience that is delightful, usable, and helps the user to achieve his or her goals. So I was, despite being born in the 80s, probably should have been, alive in the 60s because Jimi Hendrix is one of my heroes, along with the Beatles, Elton John, anyone who came out before 1989. So we're all individuals and we see things in different ways. So you can't design an experience. The way I experienced Jimi Hendrix is not the same way that you experienced Jimi Hendrix, or even the same way that my parents experienced Jimi Hendrix because they were actually alive when he was. Not everyone's going to be a fan. And because of that, you can't create a product and say, this is how everyone will experience it. I've created this product and every person will experience it the same way. No, you can't, because we're all individuals and everything we do is different. We have different backgrounds, we have different cultures, we have different levels of knowledge. You can, however, design for an experience. And when you design for an experience, you're designing with your fan base in mind. So in the same way that Jimi Hendrix really didn't care, if a certain group of people didn't like his loud music, he wasn't creating that music for them, he was creating it for his fans. So you need to figure out who your audience is for your product and create for them. So let's take a little look at the user experience design process. I can show you how to design for a positive experience. So who's involved in a UX project? Well, there's a lot of different people who might be involved in a UX project. I'm going to focus on 3 of these. But basically, we're looking at the designer, front-end developer. They could be the same person, they could not be the same person. They could be 2 separate roles. Content strategist, you might have a product manager, a user researcher, a project manager, stakeholders, and the user. These are all the people, or roles I should say, that might come into play in a user experience design project. Some of these roles might be filled by multiple people, some of these roles might not be needed, depending on the project, but in general, these are the people who you're going to see involved. But for today, I'm going to focus heavily on the designers, the front-end developers, the content strategists, and the user researchers. So, we're on a journey, we're in a new place. Sometimes it's helpful to look at a map. Way we know where we're going. So while a map's not going to tell us everything, it is going to give us a high-level view of where we are and where we want to go, where our destination is. So this is a map of UX. And you'll notice it's circular. I know it's actually kind of hard to read, and I apologize for that. But the reason that it's circular is that UX is iterative. It's it works very well with Agile in some ways because you're always iterating, you're kind of always, doing things, testing, tweaking. And to truly create a great experience, that's what you need to do. Test, retweak, and test again. You'll add new features, you'll need to add new you'll need to update content, sorry. And every time you do this, you can validate by testing. So, how do we get this wheel turning in the direction we want to go? Well, the way we get it turning is to start talking about our goals. We don't just build things to build things. When we're children playing with building blocks, we might put down the first foundational block, but by the time we start putting the second and third block down, we kind of know where we're going. We have a purpose, whether that purpose is to build a tower or a fort, stack blocks as high as you can and then knock them down. There's a reason. And we have a reason for building things too. Sometimes it's just for our own enjoyment, but most of the time, especially in our workplaces, it's because we're building a product for our business that a user is going to be using. So let's look at the diagram again. So the most important thing to notice here is that the user is in the center of the diagram. And this is because this is everything that we're doing is around this person. This is the person that is going to make or break. If this person doesn't use the product, then that doesn't help our business goals, which means we now have a product that really has no purpose anymore. So to make an app successful, you have to have it be used. So we need to identify what the user wants and what their goals are. And we need to also identify what the business wants, whether that's ourselves or the people who work above us. Why do they want to build this for the user? What's the end game? So your user goals, so let's say Jane, our user, her goals, and then the business goals, let's say our company's goals, those become your project goals. A quick note is that sometimes the term user experience design might be a little misleading. Some people might interpret it as the user's always right, and that these experiences should be designed by users. And there are reasons why having a user design an application or site could be a really terrible idea. There is a quote from Henry Ford, who created Ford Motor Company. And he said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Arguably, these were Americans and they did not want faster horses. They wanted big, fast cars, big cars, lots of gas and bad stuff for the environment. But this is why we don't have the average American designing cars. And not because Homer isn't a great guy and he's a smart guy, maybe, but because car design is not Homer's area of expertise. But that doesn't mean that Homer's struggles and frustrations aren't real. And if you're designing for someone like Homer, instead of taking this beautifully created masterpiece here and just putting that together, you might want to sit down and say, well, you know what's actually going on here? What are you actually needing? What actually do you need to solve the problems that you're having? What are the problems that you're having? So you want to use your expertise as a developer to build an application that works for them. So, welcome to my user experience design utopia. Sometimes when you're identifying the project goals, you have to make some strategic choices. And in a perfect world, let me know if this is your world, because I'd like to come and work with you. We have unlimited time, unlimited resources, unlimited materials and budgets. It's like we have everything. There are no politics to consider. Everyone's on the same page. Your entire project team, your stakeholders, your users, everyone's united in vision. Anyone work for a place like that? Anyone at all? Okay. You let me know if you do, because I want to go there. Unfortunately, as we see, none of us work in that environment, and hard choices need to be made. The field of user experience design is not a utopia either. We need to all agree on what our minimal viable product is before we get going. And if there's a disagreement on the goals, whether it be between the designer and the developer, or the designer-developer disagreeing with the product manager, it's best to start small. When you know who your users are, you can start to bring them into your conversations with your teammates. Things look a lot different when you are able to say, if we don't make Jane, who is our main user, happy, then we have failed. So how do we know what makes Jane, the user, happy? This is where user research comes in. In order to bring your users and their goals to the forefront of your conversation about goals, you need to know things about them. So going back to the question of who are we building this for? The best way to design a great experience for your users is to know who you're designing for. You aren't your user. You have domain knowledge, you have expertise, you have skills, and you have preferences and your own style for using an application. You and your team are too close to the project. I mean, you're fond of whatever you're working on, you're proud of it. But that also means that sometimes it makes it hard to step back and look at it objectively. So the best thing to do is to start talking to the actual people who will be using your product. So as soon as you start working on a project, see if you can get existing information about your users. Or at the very least, get names and contact information for them and conduct some interviews. And customer interviews are a really good way to just start to have a dialogue and gather some information about who you're designing for. So we're talking maybe 30 minutes with about 5 to 10 people who use your application and that you think represent your biggest user type. And if you're building an application for doctors, talk to some doctors. You'll put together some questions. You'll be trying to gather information about them. So things like, what does a typical day look like for you? Where do you do your work? Do you do it at home? Do you do it in the office? Do you have an office? What does a bad day look like for you? How often do you use this application in a day? What other applications do you use? You start to get a sense of what other things are influencing them while they're trying to use your application. So you get them talking, find out what's frustrating them, and then you identify their goals. And once you've talked to some of the people who use your application, what do you do with that information? One way to present that data that you have uncovered is to create a persona. And a persona is a fictional user that's created based on the common needs, challenges, and expectations you gathered from real users you spoke with. So here's an example. So this person is fictitious, but she's made up to represent a user type. So all of the attributes are real attributes that are shared by users. We conducted about 20 to 30 customer interviews to gather information, and the majority of those interviews, we were able to pull out these high-level goals and application goals. And personas can solve a lot of conflicts. You want them to feel like a real person so you can refer to them and bring them into your conversations. Give them a name, give them a picture. Because what will happen is, let's say you're having a discussion and there's a feeling of it, it's going to be a lot of extra work to put in all these features. Is it really going to make, I really don't have the time to do this. Is it really going to be good? That's, saying that versus, you know what, if we put all of these features in, is that going to slow down the product too much for Jane if she needs to look up information quickly on her mobile phone? Now that's a different discussion. It's taken the team out of the discussion and put the focus back on Jane. So how many? Maybe 3 to 5 personas. If you have less than 3, then you're not going to get enough detail. You won't have enough, there won't be enough representation. And if you have more than 5, then you start to lose focus. There's too many. So make the personas part of your team. They're a great way to define project goals and justify decisions to stakeholders. They're a way to talk about design development without making it personal. Oh, and get your team talking about the persona. Use their name, refer to them as if they're an actual person. Just make them a part of your team. You can put their picture up, print out their picture and put it up in your conference rooms and just always have them around so they're always top of mind. And people change, and so do personas. So let your persona grow as your project grows. New information, new interviews, new features, this is all a continuous process. So as you learn more about your users, update your persona. So, usability testing. Has anyone ever done any usability testing? Good, cool. Usability testing is sitting an actual person down in front of your application or website and watching them use it. You're looking to, if you incorporate usability testing into your development cycle, that's great. That's probably the biggest thing you can do right now. Is as you create things, as you build things, test it with people to validate your decisions. Especially if there is a conflict, or it's kind of one person is saying, well, let's do it this way, someone else is saying, let's do it another way. Well, let's test it. Let's see what the user does with it. And if someone in your organization is running a usability test and it's related to a project that you're on, make sure that you are able to sit in on the session as an observer, or at least see the videos later. When the user's thinking aloud, you'll be amazed at what they do versus what they say. So, to talk a little bit about design and development and user experience design. Attractive products are often easier to use. So when a product is easy to use, intuitive, and looks good, you're more likely to use it, and use it successfully. And in his book, Seductive Interaction Design, Stephen Anderson discusses how attractive products are often easier to use because we are more motivated to want them to work because they look nice. It's not fair, but unfortunately it seems to be how we're wired as human beings to some extent. And that's the thing about UX, is that beauty is only skin deep. There does need to be more than just eye candy to make the application or website successful. The functionality, the architecture, the content, the accessibility, user experience design is the consideration of all of these things and how they can be used to best meet the project goals. If it looks nice and it doesn't work, that doesn't do much for anyone. So, going back to empathy, having empathy for the user means recognizing that in a vacuum, certain things like a slow page load or a task with multiple steps that seem unnecessary may not be a big deal. But in the context of your user's day, they may actually be a very big deal. And that's why the personas we create are so important. So, content strategy. Often when we think about a design, we think about the visual aspects. The colors, the fonts, layout. But what about the content? Websites and applications are made up of stuff, and that stuff is your content. Content is the words, videos, audio clips, pictures, information that the user is here for. Content is big, and in many cases it needs a strategy to manage it. Content strategy is a plan for creating content and then managing that content. It's a plan for what you are communicating to your user and how you will communicate it. Your content should be easy to find, easy to understand, accurate, and current. It's important. Pictures are worth a lot, and our brains can interpret images pretty quickly. So we judge books by covers. You pick up a book, looks good, the cover's eye-catching, looks like it might be what you're looking for, you open it up. Now they've got you in the front door. But if you open up the book and start reading through a few pages, and you see that there are errors, incorrect information, maybe it's just blank, you're probably going to close it and move on to something else. So you don't want your user to close the cover on your application either. Content's important. The design gets them in, but the content is what makes them stay and come back time after time. And design and content go hand in hand. How much time you spend on your content is going to depend on the type of site or application you're working on. So no matter how large scale your content is, it's important to know that having a good user experience means taking a holistic approach to your product. An aesthetically pleasing product with an intuitive UI isn't going to be much good if it has outdated content or has just plain wrong information on it. And it's not going to keep people coming back to your site if it's disorganized. All right, so let's check in quickly. So we've gone over a couple of the areas of UX design, and now we're going to go to our destination, which is the value of UX and what you can do with it. So, to have a great product with user experience design, the whole team needs to be involved from the start. The team needs to start from the same place of understanding, everyone weighing in with their expertise at the beginning. We want to know what we're working towards. It's better to get the product right than to just meet deadlines. So who feels better about their work when the thing that you've built is being used by people and used successfully? I know I do. By testing early and often, we can fix usability problems with less waste. Because UX is an iterative process, we can test in low fidelity sketches and identify usability problems early before a lot of money and effort has been put into code. This means less rework. Everyone likes less rework. And when an application is easily understood and intuitive, that results in lower support costs. Everyone likes lower support costs. And most importantly, collaboration is probably the most valuable aspect of user experience design. You can't solve a problem if you don't know what the problem is. By knowing your users and knowing the problems that the designers are trying to solve, you can have a big part in coming up with a solution. So we need designers and developers to work together because the development expertise is needed. Designers often benefit from having conversations with developers in which, there is a conversation about why a certain solution just isn't feasible, and then advice from a developer about how we can achieve a similar goal doing it another way. So we need to work together to find solutions that benefit the users. Who's ready to get started? So here's the things you can do now, or the next project you work with on your team. And it doesn't matter your role. These are things you can bring back to your team, whether you're a developer, designer, product manager, whatever. So get involved early. Early collaboration is good. Make sure that, to the extent that you can, get involved with the project as early as possible. Become friends with your local product manager or project manager, and make sure they know who you are, and make sure they know to invite you to every meeting. That makes sure that you are on the same page and that you have all the information you need to start making good decisions. Solve problems early before you put a lot of effort in so you can save time. The more information that you can provide to the team early on, the more likely it is that conflicts will be avoided. Do your research. Talk to the people who use your application. Build your application for those people. Create personas to help those people and their needs and challenges that keep them at the center of your project. Test, 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 and test some more. It's really, really valuable. So, the last thing I'll leave you with is, when you're working with your team or your client, show interest in other specialties. Learn from your colleagues, but more importantly, teach your colleagues about your work. Make sure that you're having conversations and breaking down the walls that sometimes get put up between different parts of a team. Work together as a team because you're all working towards the same goals. Be solution-driven. Try to solve problems and offer solutions. If something won't work, try to find another solution that gets at the same goal. And if someone on your team isn't being solution-driven, try to understand why. And have empathy. Anyone can talk to users and think of ways to build products for them. Like the cyclists and the drivers we were talking about at the beginning, have empathy for your users. Understand their goals, and then use your expertise to give them what they need. So if you ever want to know more about user experience design, my company has put together this handy 50 best practices for user experience. It's pretty good. You'll see some of the stuff in there. But otherwise, that's it. Thank you very much.